And in the meantime, the director of the program called me and told me that um, Morgan was having difficulty and that they were evacuating him, and would I like to have the number of his roommate? And I told him, oh yes, definitely. So I called him immediately. And when Colin answered, he said, Miss Boisson, it doesn't look good. He stopped breathing, and we took him off the bus and were attempting CPR. But these kids, of course, didn't really know how to do CPR, and they're in the middle of nowhere on the mountain in Tibet. And so I immediately said to Colin, please put the phone up to Morgan's ear. And I told Morgan that we loved him, that we were proud of him, and not to be afraid.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. Today, I am delighted to welcome to the show Elizabeth Boisson. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really grateful to be here, and I know that you've already done an incredible interview with Irene Vuvulidis, who is our vice president, and I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to today.
I am so looking forward to this. I have admired your work for some time. So why will you just introduce yourself briefly so people can get to know you, and then we're going to go back and talk about the story behind where you are now.
Thank you. I would love to. I am the president and co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, which is an organization that supports parents who have had children pass. And we're a little different from other organizations, and I know that Irene talked about this a little bit, because we believe that we have a connection with our children in spirit, that they're not gone, and that we're able to move forward and heal, which is something that a lot of support groups don't believe. And the reason that we heal is because our children want us to heal. So it's a little bit different, and it was created because there was a need at the time in 2009 when my son transitioned, to be able to have a group like this, because none of the support groups that existed at the time allowed us to speak about these signs and validations that were coming through from our children.
Wow, I am so inspired by your work, and I 100% agree with everything that you just said. Just 100, 1,000, whatever the correct number is, because it's very high. That has been my experience too. And when I entered the world of, a parent who has lost children, and my children passed in 2007. They transitioned in 2007, so shortly before your experience. But there was no social media. Wasn't really a presence. And what I notice now is that everyone goes to social media for support, and the support there is dismal. It reinforces, other than your platform and what I'm trying to do in the world, what you're trying to do in the world, other than a handful of platforms, most of the work out there just perpetuates this idea that if you've lost a child, you're going to grieve the rest of your life. And I certainly don't believe that that's true. It's not been my experience, and it's not been my lived experience. So, okay, so let's go back and share what happened, because your story is so incredible and unique. And I just have to honor your beautiful son for the magnificent spirit that he is and that he brought here. So let's go back and talk about that.
And I actually started on this journey a little bit earlier than you did, because in 1991 in France, my daughter Chelsea passed when she was 2 days old.
That's
And
right.
I had been in the hospital for 2 months, and I'd been on an IV trying to keep the contractions from happening. And unfortunately, my water broke about a week before the obstetrician would allow me to finally have the baby. So I could feel that Chelsea was moving less and less in my stomach. I knew that something was wrong, but nobody at the hospital would let me have the baby. And I was on this IV to keep from having contractions, so I couldn't do anything. And by the time that she was born, her lungs were crushed, and she was put on a ventilator for 72 hours, and then she passed after that. So that was a very difficult time, but at the same time, Morgan was 2 at the time, and Cyril, my husband, was working all the time. Morgan was staying with my mother-in-law, who lived in a town that was close to where we lived in the south of France, but I didn't see him very much. And it was very, very difficult for me because not having Morgan with me was so stressful and so difficult. So when Chelsea transitioned, being able to get home to Morgan was what really healed me. Being with him and spending time with him again. And it was such a relief to finally be with him again, even though having Chelsea transition was such a difficult thing at the time. But moving forward to 2009, I had had 2 beautiful daughters in between. So they're now 32 and 30, and they've done amazing things with their lives. Morgan transitioned in 2009, as you say. So yours was 2007, Morgan's was 2009. He was studying in Nanjing in China, and it was the second time that he was studying there. He absolutely loved being in China, and he had already become very good at speaking Chinese the first time that he went. So he had been there his sophomore year, and then he went back his senior year again. And before he left, we were packing his suitcase and trying to stuff everything into this suitcase. And Morgan turned to me and he said, "Mom, I don't think I'm coming back from China this time." And I said, "Morgan, if you feel that way," and it was such a strange feeling when he said that, "you don't have to go to China. You have enough credits for your East Asia major that you're doing. Stay here, cheerlead," because he was a cheerleader for the University of Arizona cheerleading squad, "and spend time in Cave Creek when you can. We'd love that." And he said, "No, Mom, I'll be fine," which is so interesting that he said that, because I know that he's fine. He's better than fine now. But anyway, he went over to China. He'd been there for about a month, and then they had fall break. And he asked us if he could go to Hong Kong, because when he was studying there as a sophomore, he met some kids who actually were working in Hong Kong at the time. And that would have been wonderful, especially since my husband had a business in Hong Kong as well. But we were worried about the visa, being able to leave China at the time, go to Hong Kong, and then come back in. He might have had trouble getting back in. So I said, "Are there any trips being planned inside of China?" And he said, "Yes, a lot of us are all going to Tibet, because we've been studying Tibet, and 2 professors are going as well." And I thought, that's perfect. That'll be wonderful for him, because after living in India for quite some time, I'm fascinated with Tibet, and I was very excited for him to be able to go. So he left with all of these kids and flew to 11,000 feet in Lhasa. And they landed the next morning. They immediately boarded a bus to go up to the base camp of Mount Everest in Tibet. And it's 19,000 feet. And unfortunately, the two professors ended up not being able to go. So they only had a Chinese tour guide who was on the bus with them. All of these kids were very, very sick with altitude sickness as they were going up the mountain.
Wow.
Growing up, they were having to get off the bus. They were also urinating on themselves in the bus, which is a sure sign of altitude sickness, but nobody really recognized these signs because everyone was a little bit delirious. And so
it's curious why the guides wouldn't recognize.
well, the Chinese tour guide just wanted to get them up to base camp because it's safe up there. He didn't want them to be stuck on the mountain in the middle. I don't think that he was realizing that these Westerners who weren't familiar with the altitude were having so much trouble. And
Okay.
so, because of that, Morgan was kind of the big brother because he spoke better Chinese than everybody at that point. And he was helping people. He was holding their heads when they were throwing up outside the bus, and he was being, as protective as possible. But by the time that they got up to base camp, he had a terrible migraine, which is very unusual for Morgan. He had never had migraines before. And he decided to go to bed early. The only thing that he took with him, because this is one of the only things that we packed, was Benadryl. And he took a Benadryl before he went to bed. And in the middle of the night, they all were staying in a yurt, which is this huge tent where everyone was sleeping. And he was wandering around calling people the wrong name, which is also a sure sign of altitude sickness, but nobody recognized it. And the next morning at 9 o'clock, when they were supposed to go back down the mountain, they tried to wake Morgan up. And unfortunately, he was, first of all, foaming at the mouth, and they couldn't wake him up. So one of the kids, whose mother is a doctor in Washington State, called his mother and said, "What should we do?" And she said, "Get him down the mountain as quickly as possible." So these 13 kids, Morgan was 6'6", and he was 280 pounds, loaded my son onto the bus to get him down the mountain. And in the meantime, the director of the program called me and told me that Morgan was having difficulty and that they were evacuating him, and would I like to have the number of his roommate? And I told him, "Oh, yes, definitely." So I called him immediately. And when Colin answered, he said, "Miss Boisson, it doesn't look good." He stopped breathing, and we took him off the bus and were attempting CPR. But these kids, of course, didn't really know how to do CPR, and they're in the middle of nowhere on the mountain in Tibet. And so I immediately said to Colin, "Please put the phone up to Morgan's ear." And I told Morgan that we loved him, that we were proud of him, and not to be afraid. And at that moment, I was here in Cave Creek, Arizona, and he was over in Tibet at the base camp of Mount Everest. I felt the biggest hug from Morgan. Mm-hmm. And I felt so much joy and so much love. And I knew that he was okay. I knew that he was going to be fine in spite of the fact that he was transitioning. And my husband, who was sitting next to me in the office, said, "Let me speak to him," because I didn't look sad at all. And I said, "No, honey, I'm sorry. I don't think that he will be able to speak to you." And so, obviously, for my husband, for my two daughters, this was absolutely devastating. But at the same time, I knew that Morgan was still with us. And so I was telling them, "Don't worry, Morgan's going to be with us. He'll be with us forever." And it was something that I realized that every parent who has a child transition also is able to experience. It wasn't just that shared death experience that I had with Morgan, but then the signs just kept coming over and over and over again that Morgan was with us. And so being able to have these signs was incredible to me. But one of the real big issues at the time was that I was going to these support groups. I was excited about being able to share the signs. I wanted to hear about other parents' experiences as well. And when I would get to the meetings, first of all, the meetings were basically going around the circle and telling about how our children passed, and that's it. And I would see people who had been there for 15 years telling the same story, still being so sad. And then it would get to me and I would say, well, I just want to say my son just passed a few days ago and I had this incredible experience with him and I would just keep getting signs from him. Is this happening to anybody else? And the people who were the moderators would tell me, I'm sorry, we don't talk about this in this type of group. And so I would go to the parking lot after the meeting and everybody would come up to me and say, I have the same thing happening. This is so amazing. Could you tell me more? And so I knew that this was happening to other parents and that they weren't able to express themselves. And so I started an online support group a week after Morgan transition. And then I started having in-person meetings a month after. And it's funny because the group that I went to, I had expressed interest in being an affiliate leader. They contacted me about a week before I was starting my own meetings and said, we have a space available. Would you like to become an affiliate leader? It wasn't called an affiliate leader with this group. But I said, no, I think that I'm going to be starting my own group. But thank you so much for the opportunity. And the first meeting that we had, Mark Ireland discussed his book, which is called Soul Shift, Finding Where the Dead Go. And I had met Mark in a very strange coincidence. I first had a reading with Suzanne Wilson, who is one of our Helping Parents Heal certified mediums, but the first medium I'd ever gone to, because of the fact that she went to my yoga studio. She was looking for space to rent, and she was told by the person who had the yoga studio, who was a very good friend of mine, but I wasn't there because Morgan had just transitioned. How do I test your abilities? And Suzanne said, do you have a picture that I can read? And it just so happened that I had just sent this holiday card with a picture of my 3 kids on the front of the card, but no text. And so Angie showed this to her and she said, can you read this? And so Suzanne told her, yes, I can. And she immediately had Morgan come through. And she was saying, Captain Morgan, which is, Captain was his nickname in high school. She said, I see him on a mountain. I see him on his back. I see a black box being put up to his ear. And he wants to say, I love you back, which is exactly what he used to always say to me.
Wow.
She said, I see him with a megaphone standing on the mountain saying, I'm okay. And we have the megaphone from Morgan's cheerleading days that was brought to a service and given to us. And so I knew exactly what megaphone she was talking about. She said, there are a band of brothers, 3 brothers, and Colin stayed with Matt. Colin, his roommate, stayed with Matt and Morgan in Lhasa until my husband was able to get there. Even though my husband had a Chinese visa, he needed to wait 5 days to be able to get a Tibetan visa. So they stayed there waiting for him. So when she was talking about the band of 3 brothers, so these are his 2 roommates, I knew exactly who she was talking about. But the most incredible thing was that she drew a rock, and the rock had a split down the middle. And she told Angie, and I wasn't there, that this rock was going to be brought to us from the place that Morgan transitioned. So a month later, Colin came to our house with a beautiful bouquet of flowers that he said Morgan had told him to pick out, and a rock that was split in half that looked exactly like the rock that Suzanne had drawn. So these things were just so incredible. And I tried to get in touch with Suzanne and say, I'd love to get a reading from you. When can we do this? But her husband was sick at the time, and so she wasn't doing readings. So I had to wait for about a month. And in early January, she had been at a afterlife event that was with Jamie Clark, and Mark Ireland was there with his new book and other people, and she was there. And so when she met Mark, it turns out that Brandon transitioned, his son Brandon, on the McDowell mountain range, which is kind of unusual. In all of the kids that I know, and we know about 30,000 kids who are part of Helping Parents Heal, I only know 3 who have transitioned on a mountain. So Brandon is one of them. And Mark said, well, if you're going to meet with her, I'm going to sign a book for her and send it with you. So he signed the book, and Suzanne came and did the reading at our house. And it was incredible. It was one of the most incredible readings I think I've ever had. And then I read Mark's book in about a day because I just couldn't put it down. And I got in touch with him. And he was the first speaker at our first meeting here in Cave Creek at a place called Casa Mariposa. And we had 25 people come from all over the valley at the time.
Wow. Wow. And for those that don't know, tell us just a little bit about Mark Ireland, because I know the name and I know who he is, but a lot of people may not.
Well, Mark Ireland is the co-founder of Helping Parents Heal. He wasn't as involved, and he still isn't because he's so busy and he travels all the time. But when we formed our nonprofit, we did it together, and Mark was saying, okay, this is great what you're doing here in Cave Creek, but this needs to be something that's available to parents throughout the US and throughout the world. And so we figured out how to set up affiliate groups and how to train people, and put together a newsletter that I publish every month. And so Mark is the co-founder, as I say, and he's
also a medium, right? Yeah.
Well, he's not really a medium. I don't think he would call himself a medium, but he comes from a family of Richard Ireland was a very famous medium who did mediumship readings to the stars in Hollywood. And Mark is the person who tests our mediums for Helping Parents Heal, and he has a system in place that consists of 5 blind readings. It's free of charge, and it's something that's helped us enormously in being able to know who to invite to be Helping Parents Heal mediums.
Okay. I knew I had seen him on your website, and I was trying to remember what all the connections were. So thank you for clarifying that.
Well, yeah,
I'm curious about a few things, and one is, how did this passing of your son, if at all, reconnect you also to your daughter who had passed? Was there some, it just feels like there's some connection there, or something that either helped you through that process, or, yeah, I'm just curious.
that's a really good question. And yes, When Chelsea passed, I had been practicing yoga. I mean, I lived in India for a very long time, and I think that a lot of different things that I had been doing, being vegetarian and all of these other things, had helped me to move forward and heal. I also did transcendental meditation at the time. Now it's meditation, but it used to be called transcendental meditation. But then when Morgan transitioned, I've been told by two different mediums on separate occasions that Chelsea was the first person to meet Morgan when he transitioned. She grabbed his hand and she led him to me. And that was why I got that enormous hug. So I always like to tell people who have maybe only had one child transition that I feel very fortunate that she was there and was able to guide him to me. And I think that it was all pre-planned that this was going to happen this way. And so having Morgan transition has really allowed me to reconnect with Chelsea, whose energy is much softer, much quieter, but she definitely has control of a lot of the growth of helping parents heal. She's the inspiration from the very beginning, and then Morgan after.
Wow, wow. When you began talking about your son's planned travel, back to China and him saying, I don't think I'll be returning, I wrote down the soul knows, because like I've had I had experiences like that. I've talked to so many other people who've had experiences like that. I think sometimes, and I did this, I misinterpreted those things afterwards. I misinterpreted them as warnings that we shouldn't have gone on the trip, that, my kids wouldn't have died if I had paid attention. But looking back now, I mean, there is just so much evidence that that was not the case at all, that it was just my soul knowing that this was happening. I had things that my kids left that are also evidence that they knew at a soul level, not at a conscious level, but at a soul level. I'm just curious what your thoughts are about that, if you can shed any more insight on that idea.
Of course, and you are exactly right. And it's so interesting to me because I was a helicopter mom with Morgan. I was always worried, even though he was traveling all over the world. When he was 2 weeks old, we went to Chad in Africa because we went to visit his parents there. Then we went back to the States to see my parents when he was like 4 weeks old, I think. He was always traveling, and he learned lots of languages. And I think that that was his greatest joy, was to be able to travel. But I was always worried about him. And I was worried about him going to China as well. But from the moment he was born, I felt like I wasn't going to have him for very long. And on the other hand, I've never felt that way about my daughters. So it's such an interesting thing that, especially for this 6'6", 280-pound man, that I would, and we were on the phone almost every day, not because I'm a helicopter mom, but just because he loved to talk to me too. And we would Skype when he was in China, and we would, talk by phone when he was in Tucson. But I do believe that, first of all, I knew this was going to happen. But then the fact that he told me this right before he was about to go to China, that he didn't think he'd be coming back, I know that he knew as well. And I agree that people might believe that these are warning signs. They're not warning signs. I truly believe that they're just letting us know that this is going to happen. And it's actually such a relief when we think back on those things that either our children have said or that we were feeling beforehand, because we knew. And there was nothing that could be done about it. And they are happy, healthy, and home. We're still in school. We have lots to learn before we join them, but when we do, it will be as though not 1 second has passed. And I know that this is the case. I know that they're enjoying everything that we're doing right now. I think that we spend time with them at night. I don't think that we necessarily remember when we're spending time with them, but they're not missing us at all. We're the ones that are having a really hard time missing our children. And Earth School is one of the most difficult schools in the universe. And unfortunately, for some strange reason, you and I signed up for Earth School. But I know that we're learning so much through Earth School, and I also know that our kids are just so proud of us for doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So much love from the other side. I want to touch on something that you just said, and you said, they're not missing us, and for sure, because they're with us, they're with us. But I spoke to a woman recently, and she had lost her husband, so a different loss, but significant. They've been married for many, many years, and she was under this impression, because when people have near-death experiences and they come back and they talk about how they just wanted to stay on the other side, and that they didn't they didn't feel as connected to the earth once they left to the other side. And she got this idea that once somebody passed, that they weren't concerned about us anymore. They weren't worried about us anymore. They weren't, they had moved on, and we were in the past. And I, of course, feel differently. But, when you said that about, he's not missing us, I just want to emphasize, and, maybe have you talk to a little bit about this idea that they're not missing us because they're connected to us, not because they've forgotten about us.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And I just want to say that first hug that I got from Morgan never stopped. Every time that I would start to feel sad, I would get that same hug, and I would ride along. I could feel his arms around my neck in the car, just hanging on my shoulders. He's never left me. And I didn't want to imply that they ever, when I say that they're not missing us, it's because of the fact that they're so happy because they can interact with, they can hug us as much as they want to. We don't necessarily feel that hug, but I feel very fortunate to feel those hugs. I think that as we work towards being able to connect with them more, we're able to feel physically their presence more and more as well, and to hear them as well, and to maybe even see them, which is something that some parents do. And I must say that in Helping Parents Heal, we have so many of our parents, especially our affiliate leaders, who become mediums after their children have transitioned, because they have so much contact with their children, first of all, but then they also have other children coming in. We have a wonderful, our affiliate director, or one of the three of our affiliate directors, just did a gallery reading for the first time last night. She was certified by Mark, and it was fabulous. And she has two sons in spirit. One completed suicide about a year and a half before her other boy fell out of a window at a fraternity. And she has just done so much in terms of spiritual development. She spends time with her kids in spirit as well. And I also want to say that we have a soul pod that we go through every lifetime with. So our kids are part of that soul pod. We will never, ever be separated from them. From what I understand through soul planning, we might not be exactly in the same roles the next time that we are interacting with them, but that we are always together. Another thing that's important is that people get worried about the idea of reincarnation. And I want everybody to understand that what I believe is that when we reincarnate, it's just a part of our soul that comes down. It's not the whole soul. Our whole soul is over there. We're still over there. And in fact, I believe that we're still over there with our kids. So our kids, when they get over there, they're actually interacting with us over there. But they also know that we're still going through Earth School. So they're helping us out here in Earth School, and they're also there. So they're not missing us because of all of that. It might be a little difficult for a lot of people, especially people who are early in this journey, to wrap their heads around. But I truly believe that we are, first of all, we're all one. And I think that the only lesson that we really need to learn here on Earth is that it's all about love. Love for each other, love for ourselves as well. But the more that we can do for others while we're here, the better our experience is, and the more incredible the welcome is going to be once we get back to where our kids are. So, and again, I'm going into things that are a lot deeper than maybe Irene got into, and I don't mean to be confusing, but I do believe that being able to understand all of this has been one of my one of the ways that I've been able to heal so well as well.
And I believe that too, as well. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think that this is an opportunity. We live in a time, and this is an opportunity for us to all awaken to our spiritual connections, to our spiritual gifts. And sometimes the passing of a loved one is that portal to awakening our soul plan, our soul contract, our soul agreements, an awakening to what is really happening here. What is our connection to the other side? I lost my brother to suicide many years ago, and that was the beginning point for me to really dive deeper into what is this all about, and knowing that he's okay. One of the things I also want to talk about, and I would love to hear what you have to say about, like, parents, because a lot of times parents will say they either question whether or not their child is still there and still okay, or they get really concerned that, okay, they might still be there, but I can't connect with them. What do you advise parents who want to be able to connect with, or anybody for that matter, for, anybody, a parent, if you're wanting to connect with anybody that has crossed over, what kind of advice do you give people as far as how they can start to pursue that connection?
Well, I think that the connection is, it's a two-way street, first of all. And I think that our kids start immediately because they kind of go to school to learn how to connect with us. I think that for people who have just had a loved one transition, a lot of times you're so deep in that sadness that you aren't able to see all of the signs and all of the things that our kids are sending us, or our loved ones, our brother, for instance, are sending us. But I think that there are so many different ways that we can use to allow ourselves to see those signs. In fact, I have a list in our first book, Life to Afterlife, Helping Parents Heal the book. I have a list of 10 different things to do to be able to better connect with our children in spirit, and to heal from the passing of a loved one. Could I just very quickly read through those 10?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That would be fabulous. Thank you.
I think that this would be something that would be
Will
helpful.
you show the cover too? Because
Of
for
course.
those that are looking, that are on video, Life to Afterlife, Helping Parents Heal. the book?
So this book was written by 20 Shining Light parents. Irene is in here with Carly, but it's our board members and it's people who are a part of helping parents heal. And then at the very end, I've put how to heal from the passing of a child, because I just feel like it's important for people to understand, first of all, that it's possible, but then second of all, what do I need to do? First of all, the most important thing is to know that your child is not gone. The veil that separates us from our son or daughter is as thin as a sheet of wax paper. And when we see them again, we will feel as though not 1 second has passed, as I was just saying to you earlier. As Suzanne Giesemann so eloquently puts it, our kids in spirit are still right here. Number 2, take 1 breath at a time, then 1 minute at a time, until you are ready to move forward. Nobody has to move forward quickly. In fact, it doesn't affect our kids in spirit in the slightest if we are stuck, because time is very different over there. So they see the big picture. They see that ultimately we're going to be able to move forward and heal. Everyone's journey is different. Don't compare yours to anyone else's. You are unique just as your child is unique. Number 3, know that your child is happy, healthy, and home, which is what I said earlier, and we are still in school, and we have so much to accomplish before we hug our kids again. But for now, they walk beside us, holding our hands and leading us toward healing. Number 4, surround yourselves with friends who understand. This is very important. Our kids in spirit are all friends with each other.
Yes.
It is they who have connected
I have
us.
felt that so much. It's like every parent I meet, and I'll just feel my kids come in and they'll be like, we're here, we're all here.
Well, they're all friends. They are all getting us together. And they also, the main thing is that we need to expand our friend base to include those who love to hear about our kids in spirit. We keep them alive in our hearts and spirits by continuing to tell their stories. And this is really important because I'm sure that everyone on here has had certain friends drop off, maybe even family members who have dropped off because they have a very hard time figuring out what to say when they have a friend who or a family member who has had a child transition. It's very difficult for them to find the right words. But when you surround yourself, and your kids are going to be sending all these people to you, with people who understand, you can talk to them about your beautiful children. Number 5, be kind, both to yourself and to others. Helping others helps us even more. This is so important. Once you move forward on the path to healing, reach a hand back to help others who are not so far along on that path. Number 6, express gratitude. This is something that I do immediately every single day when I get out of bed. We have so much to be grateful for on our journey. Watch for the signs and gifts that your children are sending, and be sure to always thank them. This will automatically bring more gifts, and that's important because sometimes people just say, I'm sure that bobcat that just crossed the road has nothing to do with my son, even though he was a U of A cheerleader, a wildcat. No, you've got to be able to tell yourself, oh my gosh, this is a sign from my son, and that will be something that will lead to more and more signs. Express forgiveness. This is number 7, for yourself and for others. This is really, really important. We can't heal without letting go of the feelings of guilt and anger that hold us back. Number 8, live each day in honor of your child in spirit. They are so proud of us and they share in everything that we do. Number 9, raise your vibration. Eat healthy plant-based foods. Practice yoga and meditation. Take long hikes outdoors. Take your shoes off and connect your feet to the earth. Use crystals and essential oils. Use sound meditation and breathing exercises. And again, practice kindness wherever you go. So this is not something that is obligatory. You don't have to become a vegetarian. or not eat meat. But I think that the more vegetables, the lighter that you're eating, the things that are better for your body, the more easy it will be for us to connect with our children. Oh, also not drinking alcohol, although I'm not against it, but I think that that's something that also helps. Number 10, learn to communicate with your child in spirit through automatic writing, guided meditation, the pendulum, dream visits, mirror gazing, forest bathing, Reiki, and much more. We can all do this. And our kids high five each other every time they see us smile. Well, that's number 10. And I just truly believe that if we follow these steps and we understand that our kids are still right here, we will connect with them and be able to live in this world, one foot here and one foot on the other side, which is basically the way that I feel I live my life every day. And you must
Yes.
too.
I can totally agree with that as well. Did you find it? Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's a beautiful list and beautiful advice, beautiful direction.
Thank you.
Things for us to strive for. It's not about perfection. It's about just these little steps moving forward in a gentle way. And I always tell people, the very first thing you can do is just believe. Believe that they're here. Start talking to them, even if you can't feel them, even if you can't tell that they're there yet. Just believe it. Allow yourself, because belief is just a thought we think over and over again. So if you just continue to practice the thought that they are here and start to talk to them, I have a very left brain approach to things, and it took a long time. I would feel my kids around at different times and like bigger events and different significant things. But I didn't have that understanding that I could actually communicate. I could pick up the phone. I could initiate the contact. I could, start the conversation. So I really appreciate your insight on that, because it's so helpful.
It's so interesting because my dad throughout my life has always been saying what is perceived as real is real in its consequences. And this was basically for, getting a doctorate, being able to go through school and do great things and helping other people and things like that. But I also believe that this is something that applies to being able to communicate with our kids. We need to allow ourselves to believe that this is possible, and then it will happen naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I wondered, you had this shared death experience. That's actually a phrase that's commonly used in this space, a shared death experience, where you felt that contact between him when he transitioned. How did that, when you shared that with your husband, who's also grieving this loss, or your daughters who are also grieving this loss, how did they understand that? Was it hard for you to communicate to them? Because you had the experience, like you had the visceral experience of it. So I'm just wondering how that went for them, if that was helpful to them, or how
That
they felt about
night,
it.
they were all, pretty much on the floor in the living room, just completely in puddles.
Of course.
And I told them that Morgan was still with us. And I think they were all looking at me like I was a little bit crazy. And I said, he wants us to be able to move forward and heal. And, one of the things about being a Shining Light sibling, and I'm sure that you've realized this yourself, is that it brings with it so much intuition, so much psychic ability. My girls started having experiences with Morgan almost right away. In fact, my daughter had one thing that happened to her when she was in London studying that she didn't tell me for about a year because she was so amazed by it. But the first thing that happened to her was that she went over to the London School of Economics, and she was studying there, and she felt like she'd lost her connection with Morgan. And she had been getting signs from him before she went over as an undergraduate. And so one day she decided to sit on her bed and meditate, and she had her hands open, holding space. And she felt herself float up from the bed, float across the hall to the elevator, go down the elevator, go out the front of the building, and then float back up to where her window was. And she looked in the window and she saw Morgan standing over her, holding space, same way. She said it was the most powerful thing, knowing that he was actually there and that she hadn't lost him. But also, while she was in Paris studying at Sciences Po, she had gone out to a New Year's Eve party, and unfortunately, she went with her cousin and her cousin's boyfriend. She had taken Imitrex for this terrible migraine that she had, and they drove all the way across town. She didn't even know where they were, really. And she had a little tiny cocktail dress on. It was sleeveless, black. She put her coat and her purse at the check-in area, went in, and after the first glass of champagne, she started feeling really terrible. So she told Anne-Sophie that she was going to leave, and Anne-Sophie said, okay, no problem, just go ahead, although Anne-Sophie didn't know where she was. And so she went down to the street, found a taxi, jumped in the first taxi she saw. She looked over to the person who was sitting next to her and realized she didn't know the other passenger. So she jumped out at the next stoplight, realized she hadn't gotten her coat or her purse, looked up at the street sign, didn't recognize the street sign at all, and it started snowing. And here she is in this little tiny cocktail dress, no money, no anything. Her next memory is the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, her roommates were shaking her awake and saying, we got to get to Portugal. The train is about to leave. We've got to go. And it turned out that she realized that Morgan carried her home all the way, carried her 7 flights of stairs, kicked in the door. One of her roommates said that at 3 in the morning, she heard the door being kicked in, put her in bed, and saved her, because I don't think that there would have been any way that she could have ever gotten home otherwise. He also has a very close friend who's a firefighter, who is a Shining Light brother, whose brother had passed right before Morgan did. And he became a firefighter after Morgan. He was the mascot on the cheerleading team. So he was Wilbur Wildcat. Morgan was one of the cheerleaders. And he became a firefighter in Peoria. And on the first job, he and another firefighter were taking a car out of the garage because the house was burning. The other firefighter was in the car. They had put it in neutral, and Dan was going to push the car out of the garage. And all of a sudden, he felt 2 huge arms come around his waist and pull him backward off of his feet all the way back to the wall. And at that moment, an air conditioning unit dropped right in the place of where he was standing that would have killed him.
Wow.
And Dan knew it was Morgan that saved him. And the guy in the car said, dude, what just happened? Because he saw him fly off his feet backward. So there are some incredible miracles that Morgan has accomplished since he's transitioned. And I think that these things have helped my girls to understand that he's still here with us. The things that my husband also experiences, he's had some really incredible things happen as well. And I think that one of the things that helped was the fact that I talked about it right away, and that they were all very open-minded to hearing about how Morgan is still a huge part of our lives.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I had I was going to ask you about some of the signs that he shares with you, because they're not all, huge and miraculous. A lot of times they're just the everyday things that we see. So I'm wondering what you've experienced as far as that, just to share some of those things, because I think it helps people to start noticing things and going, oh my goodness, if I'm seeing, for me, it was 12s everywhere for a while. And I was like, okay, wait a second, this is not normal. So I had to kind of look at it a little closer. But I think that if we open our mind a little bit, we can start to see these things.
Yeah, and it's important to realize that the signs don't have to be earth shaking, and they come through animals a lot. Our kids are able to guide the animals to do the things that they do, kind of like they're using a drone almost, and the animals love it. So the birds love it if they are being brought closer, and they play along. Deer as well coming into your yard, especially sometimes. Oh gosh, as I'm saying that, we have deer just going right behind the house. It's just amazing, which doesn't happen all the time, but they are right now. As well as for us, it's a bobcat because of the fact that Morgan was a wildcat in Tucson. So wildcats are bobcats. One day we went for a hike in Spur Cross, which is a preservation area right behind our home. And it just so happened that it was Morgan's 25th birthday. And I was thinking, I hope that something exciting happens today, but I wasn't really expecting it. And as we were walking through Spur Cross, we were almost to the end, and we see this bobcat pooping on a hill as we're going up the hill. And I thought, oh, that is just so unusual. Why is he right in the middle of the path? And then after that, we get up closer to him, and this bobcat, who's a wild animal, comes up to us purring. It was like coming around us, and we could hear it purring, and we were just so amazed. So we have all these pictures of the bobcat. And then when I got back into the car, because you don't have any internet connection there, I looked at the pictures, and the pictures were taken at 11:23, and Morgan's birthday is November 23rd. So it was just an amazing sign. But again, that's kind of a big one. A lot of times they'll show themselves in license plates as well, in messages that they send to us through the license plates, maybe with their initials, maybe with their birth date, as well as electricity. A lot of times they will blink lights on and off to tell us that they're here, as well as plumbing. With plumbing, they are also able to control the plumbing and the water flow and things like that. But I have seen some of the most incredible signs possible. And as you can imagine, I have heard some of the most incredible. In fact, in this book, Life to Afterlife, there's one story about Lori Savoy, who is one of our board members, whose son Garrett had passed, and they did a celebration of life, and all of the family was standing in the kitchen at the island. And they had balloons for Garrett, and one of this a red balloon had escaped, and it was following them all around the island. So it was like, instead of coming up to the top, it was just slowly going around all of the people who were at the island. So one of the family members said, oh, that must be Garrett. And there was this, and everybody was laughing. And there was this other kid who was one of his cousins who said, that's not Garrett, that's ridiculous. And he went and sat down at a computer, and he was working on a computer across the room. So that balloon floated across the room. And then when it got to him, it kind of went up against his back, and then it went down between his legs and popped up in front of him. And the kid was like, this can't be Garrett. This is ridiculous. If you're Garrett, go down the hall and get me a beer. So this balloon goes down the hall in the house, and it gets to the place where the refrigerator is, where the beer is, not in the kitchen, and just stops there in front of the refrigerator. So the
Wow.
whole family is following the balloon by this time. And that kind of thing is the kind of thing that I hear happening all the time in the different families that I talk to. It's just amazing. Once you're open to this kind of thing, and of course this kid wasn't, but now he is. Everybody else in the family was pretty open to it. There are some things that are just complete miracles, and I call them collateral beauty. I feel like these are the gifts that our kids are sending us, and I know that that's a movie with Will Smith as well, but I believe that we experience collateral beauty from our kids.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. Share a little bit about Helping Parents Heal and how people can get connected with Helping Parents Heal, and anything you want to share about how that all came to be, yeah.
Well, I would love to. I would first like to just let everybody know, first of all, it's an international organization. We have affiliate groups throughout the world, and right now we're in Hong Kong, Canada, Brazil, the United States, Mexico, as well as the United Kingdom, Norway, Sweden, South Africa, the United Arab Emirates, as well as India and Australia, New Zealand. So, and then we have a lot of online presence as well. So a lot of the Zoom meetings, if you're not able to be in one of the locations that these meetings are, you can also join by Zoom. We have caring listeners as well that I think Irene explained, our parents who have gone down the healing path a bit further and who reach a hand back to help others forward. And all of those are volunteers. And we have different life experiences, different ways that children have transitioned, but we have 11 different languages that are spoken by our caring listeners as well. We also have a lot of different affiliate groups, not just groups specifically for location. We have, for instance, Helping Fathers Heal, and this is a book that was written by our dads to talk about how the healing is different for dads than it is for moms, and they hold their own meetings once a week by Zoom because and moms are not allowed to join because they want to be able to talk amongst themselves about their healing journeys. We have Helping Siblings Heal as well. And they also have meetings by themselves, and they have in-person and Zoom meetings. This book right here was written about all of our volunteers. It's called Shining Lights Parents Speak. So we call ourselves Shining Light Parents, as Irene said, because bereaved parents is probably one of the saddest words in the dictionary. This is just 130 of our volunteers who were interviewed by Dr. Mark Pitstick, and by Lynn Holohan, that talks about how all of these volunteers moved forward and healed. And it's really, so it's called Wisdom and Inspiration from Helping Parents Heal Leaders, and it's really a wonderful book as well. So there are 3 books that are available, and they always go, they're always free on Kindle every 3 months, because we can do it every 3 months. So I'll try to let you know the next time that we do it so that people can download them and read them if they'd like to. We also, as Irene said, have conferences every 2 years, and the conferences are always so uplifting and healing, and we sell out almost immediately when we open registration. And then just because of the fact that the kids do it, another thing I just want to say is that everything that has happened with this organization is because the kids are running everything that we're doing. And I must say that some of the people that I love the most and that are the most important to me are people who I have met through Helping Parents Heal. And Irene is one of those people. She is definitely almost like a sister to me. And there are so many other people who are part of Helping Parents Heal who are the same. And We have a website, helpingparentsheal.org. We also have an Instagram, and it's just Helping Parents Heal on Instagram, as well as a YouTube channel. And we have almost 800 videos right now that are done of experts from the afterlife community and grief community, shining light parents who speak, as well as authors. These are all really, really uplifting interviews that we do, as well as a LinkedIn that has all of our information on it as well. So on the Instagram, it's easy to just click on the LinkedIn and see all of, and we have a monthly newsletter as well that tells about all of the validation stories. So I'm trying to think if
and I don't know if you mentioned the Facebook group, but that's also Helping Parents Heal, the main, and it's quite active.
We have probably 200 Facebook groups, but we have the main Facebook group, which is where all of the meetings are posted. And this is the only way that parents can get onto the meetings, because we want them to be a safe place for siblings and parents and families to heal. So we put those Zoom links on Facebook once people have been admitted into Helping Parents Heal. But we have lots of different groups that people can join on Facebook. And thanks for reminding me. You're right, we do have Facebook.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful platform. I've been on there for a number of years and been kind of an observer. Every once in a while I pop in and share something about my own kids and my own journey, but it's a beautiful community of people loving and supporting each other from this perspective of our kids are still around, and it's such a beautiful perspective. So I appreciate you so much. Anything else you want to share with us before we say goodbye today?
I think that that's all, except that I would just like to tell you that I am so impressed with everything that you have done in honor of your kids. And I know that they must be so, so proud of you. And one of the things that I always get excited about is that when I meet someone new, I always think to myself, when I get over there, I'm going to get to hug their kids too. So I can't wait until I'm able to hug all of these kids in spirit that I have been able to meet and know so intimately here. And I just feel like that's going to be one of the best days of my life, is to be able to see all of them in person. So anyway, thank you for doing this. I appreciate you doing such a wonderful show. And again, I know that the interview with Irene was one of the best that I've ever watched with Irene. So I hope that everyone's able to watch that one as well. And thank you for doing what you're doing.
I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you so much. This has been so delightful. Your story is so important. The work that you're doing is world shifting. It literally is. I will tell you, a few years ago, when I received the soul calling to walk into this grief space, and I started looking around at what was available for people, and I saw group after group after group online that was just reinforcing the idea that we're going to grieve forever. And it was so discouraging. And your space in this space is a light that is transforming the grief space for not only parents, but siblings and so many others who have experienced loss. And truly the experience of loss can be such an opening for our spiritual awakening. And when we have the guidance, like what you're providing. So thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm just infinitely grateful and impressed with the work that you do. So thank you. Thanks for being here today.
Not me, it's the kids. It's and it's all of our incredible affiliate leaders as well and caring listeners. But I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much for having me on today. I am glad that we were able to connect, and I'm sure that we'll be meeting in person someday soon.
It was a beautiful privilege to have you here today. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Julie.